The first mistake Eleanor Parker made was stepping outside. The wind in Montana Territory could cut a person in two, but it was the sound carried on that wind that chilled her deeper than bone. A woman's cry. Not of pain, but of pure terror. She saw it through the grimy window of Finch's trading post. A group of men dragging a young native woman through the mud. The woman was pregnant, her hands clutching her swollen belly as a man struck her across the face. "Stay put," Mr. Finch grunted, grabbing her arm. His breath was sour with cheap whiskey. "That's Blackfeet business." Eleanor had come west to teach, to bring knowledge to the frontier. But the school was closed, her funds were gone, and now she was stacking barrels for a drunk. She'd learned one thing out here. Business, whether it was Blackfeet or white, was almost always ugly. "They're beating a pregnant woman," she said, her voice shaking. She pulled her arm free. "Their ways ain't our ways," Finch warned, his eyes narrowing. But Eleanor was already moving. She pushed the heavy door open, and the cold slammed into her. The men surrounding the woman barely noticed at first. They were laughing. One of them, a white man she recognized as a trapper who traded stolen furs, kicked the woman in the ribs. "Stop this at once!" Eleanor's voice was louder than she expected, sharper. The men turned. Their amusement curdled into contempt. The trapper stepped forward, wiping a smear of blood from his knuckles. "This ain't your concern, missy. She dishonored her people." "She's with child," Eleanor said, planting herself between them and their victim. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she stood her ground. This was it. This was the moment her prim Eastern education met the brutal reality of the West, and she wasn't backing down. Suddenly the ground seemed to vibrate. Hoofbeats, fast and hard. A group of Blackfeet riders crested the nearby ridge, their figures stark against the gray sky. They were led by a man who sat on his horse as if he were part of it, a commanding presence that silenced the clearing instantly. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his long black hair braided with a single eagle feather. Even the sneering trapper took a step back. The leader's eyes scanned the scene. The beaten woman, the cowardly men, and finally the lone white woman with fire in her hair standing guard. "What happens here?" he asked. His English was perfect, his voice a low rumble. "Chief Running Wolf," one of the men stammered. "This woman, she betrayed her husband, with a white man." The chief's gaze didn't leave Eleanor. "And you interfere in Blackfeet matters?" Eleanor lifted her chin. "I interfere when I see cruelty." A hush fell over the entire trading post. No one spoke to Running Wolf like that. He was more than a chief. They called him a king, a man who had united the scattered bands and held this territory in an iron grip. He studied her for a long, unblinking moment. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "What is your name, brave one?" "Eleanor Parker." He nodded slowly. "Eleanor Parker." He said her name as if testing its weight. "This is good." He barked a command in his own tongue. Two of his warriors moved forward, gently lifting the injured woman onto a horse. He turned back to Eleanor, his eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the light. "You have the heart of a Blackfeet woman, though your skin is pale as the winter moon." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear it, a low, intense promise that made the hairs on her arms stand up. "You will be my queen." Without another word, he mounted his horse and was gone, leaving Eleanor standing speechless in a cloud of dust and whispered rumors. That night, Finch found her staring into the fire, the chief's words still echoing in her head. "You made a powerful friend or a deadly enemy today, girl," he said, pouring himself a drink. "And Running Wolf ain't the kind of man who says things he don't mean. He just declared his intentions for you in front of his men and mine." "It was just words," she said, trying to convince herself. Finch let out a harsh laugh. "Words have power out here, girl. He didn't just offer you protection. He claimed you. That woman they were beating, Singing Bird, she was accused of lying with a cavalry officer, an officer who vanished right after. But the consequence, she has to bear it alone." He stared into the flames, his expression grim. Running Wolf walks between two worlds, they say. Went to the white man's school. But don't you ever forget, at his heart, he's Blackfeet. And he just decided you belong to him now. 2 weeks later, the whispers hadn't stopped. Every time a Blackfeet rider came to the post, their eyes would find Elelenar. A flicker of curiosity, and something else, assessment. The white settlers looked at her like she was a traitor. She was an island, caught between two shores. Then, one morning, a young woman entered the store. She was no more than 16, with eyes that darted around nervously. "You Elelenar Parker?" "Yes. I am Morning Star, sister of Singing Bird." She held out a small package wrapped in deerskin. "She sends thanks. The baby will come soon. She is safe now, because of you." Morning Star paused, gathering her courage. "Chief Running Wolf sends a message. He asks you to come to the winter camp. For a ceremony." Before Elelenar could answer, Finch stepped out from the back room. "She ain't going to no Indian camp." Morning Star flinched, but Elelenar held up a hand. "I can speak for myself, Mr. Finch." She turned back to the girl. "A ceremony of thanks?" "Yes," Morning Star said. "In 3 days. I will come with warriors to escort you." She added, as if reciting a line she'd been taught, "The chief says you are not a prisoner. You are a guest of honor." After the girl left, Finch grabbed her by the arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Have you lost your mind? A guest of honor? Girl, you don't get it. You will be my queen." That wasn't poetry. It was a proposal. Or a demand. He's unmarried. He's the most powerful man in this territory. And he wants you. "You're mistaken," Elelenar insisted, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "Am I?" Finch's face was pale. "I've been on this frontier for 30 years. I know how this works. He's not inviting you for tea. He's summoning his future wife, and if you refuse, you'll insult him in front of his entire nation. There's no coming back from that. You go to that camp, you're not coming back. Not as the woman you are now." His words were a cold stone in her gut. Was he right? Was this an invitation or a trap? Running Wolf had saved a woman's life, but he had done it with an authority that was absolute and terrifying. His gaze had felt like a brand, marking her as his. Now he was calling her to his home, to the heart of his power. To refuse was to declare herself an enemy. To accept was to walk into the unknown, a world with rules she didn't understand, and into the hands of a man who had already decided her fate. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. 3 days later, Elelenar mounted the horse the warriors brought for her. She had packed a small bag with a change of clothes and a few modest gifts, her mind a whirlwind of fear and fragile hope. "You won't return," Finch said from the doorway of the trading post. It wasn't a prediction. It was a final judgment. "I'll be back in 2 days," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The journey was a silent one. The warriors rode with an unnerving stillness, their eyes constantly scanning the trees. They moved through the pine-covered hills like ghosts, eventually descending into a sheltered valley where dozens of lodges stood in perfect rings. Smoke curled into the sky. It was a village, alive and breathing. Children stopped their games to stare at the white woman with fire-red hair. This was his kingdom. She was led to the largest lodge at the very center of the camp. Elaborate paintings of hunts and battles covered its hide walls. Morning Star gestured for her to wait. A moment later, Running Wolf emerged. Dressed in ceremonial buckskin adorned with intricate beadwork, he seemed even more imposing than before. "Elelenar Parker," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent camp. "You honor us." She dismounted, her legs unsteady, aware of 100 pairs of eyes on her. "Thank you for the invitation, Chief." "Come," he said, gesturing to the lodge. "Singing Bird awaits." Inside, it was warm and surprisingly spacious. Furs covered the floor. On a raised platform sat Singing Bird, her face healed, her belly immense. She looked up, her expression a mixture of gratitude and awe. "Teacher woman," she said softly, using the name his people had given Elelenar. "You saved my child. I only did what was right, Elelenar said, moving to sit beside her. No, Running Wolf interrupted from across the fire. What you did, few would dare. His eyes locked on hers, intense and unblinking. That day at the trading post, you know what I said to you? Eleanor's cheeks grew hot. You said I would be your queen. He nodded. Finch. That traitor. He told you what this means, yes? He suggested it was a proposal, she managed to say. To her astonishment, Running Wolf let out a rich, deep laugh that seemed to shake the very poles of the lodge. Finch is a fool who sees the world through the bottom of a bottle. He understands nothing of our ways. He leaned forward, the firelight dancing in his eyes. Among my people, a queen is not a wife. A queen is an advisor, a leader of the women, a voice of counsel to the chief. Relief washed over Eleanor so powerfully she felt dizzy. It wasn't a demand. It was an honor. An incredible, unprecedented honor. I see. Then I am honored, though I don't know what I could possibly offer. You have already proven your worth, he said simply. He then gestured to an elderly woman sitting silently in the shadows of the lodge. This is Wise Owl Woman. She is the keeper of our stories. She will explain the duties of the queen. The old woman's eyes were like black chips of obsidian. She looked at Eleanor, not with warmth, but with a severe, penetrating gaze. She began to speak in the Blackfeet tongue, her voice dry as autumn leaves. Running Wolf translated. The queen stands for the honor of the tribe. She advises in times of peace and in times of war. She holds the trust of the people. He paused, his expression becoming unreadable. And in times of great famine, when the winter is long and the buffalo are gone, she has one final duty. Eleanor leaned in, her relief turning to confusion. What duty? Running Wolf's face was a mask of stone. He translated the old woman's final, chilling words. She offers her life to the spirits to ensure the survival of the people. It is the highest sacrifice, the ultimate honor. The air in the lodge turned to ice. This wasn't an honor. It was a death sentence. Finch hadn't been wrong that she wouldn't be coming back. He had just been wrong about how. Running Wolf hadn't just claimed her. He had chosen her to be his people's sacrificial lamb. The world outside the lodge seemed to disappear. The warmth of the fire, the soft furs, the presence of singing bird. It all faded into a roaring in Eleanor's ears. A sacrifice. The word was alien, a relic from a brutal, ancient time. Yet, the old woman's face was devoid of emotion, and Running Wolf's expression was grimly serious. He had brought her here not to honor her, but to bind her to a fate she couldn't possibly accept. Is this a joke? She whispered, her voice trembling. We do not joke about such matters, Running Wolf said, his tone flat. It has been the way for generations. A leader must be willing to give everything for the people. The queen is the soul of the nation. Her sacrifice is what proves our worthiness to the Great Spirit. Eleanor stood up, her legs feeling like they might collapse. I can't. I'm not one of you. This is barbaric. The old woman, Wise Owl, spoke again, her sharp gaze pinning Eleanor in place. Running Wolf translated. She says courage is not barbaric. She says you showed the heart of a Blackfeet woman. Now, you must show the spirit. This was a nightmare, a carefully constructed trap. He had used her act of compassion as a pretense to lure her here. The entire camp had watched her arrive, watched the chief greet her as a guest of honor. They were all witnesses. She was trapped. Her mind raced, searching for an escape. She had to get back to the trading post, back to Finch, as much as she disliked him. He represented her world, a world where women weren't sacrificed to appease angry gods. Just as she was about to turn and run, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts, the thunder of hoofbeats, the metallic jingle of military gear. It was a sound every settler and Native American on the frontier dreaded. Cavalry. Running Wolf was on his feet in an instant. his hand flying to the knife at his belt. He exchanged a dark look with Wise Owl Woman. This was not a friendly visit. Through the lodge flap, Eleanor saw blue-uniformed soldiers dismounting, their rifles held at the ready. They were surrounding the camp. "Chief!" a warrior yelled, bursting into the lodge. "It is Captain Burwell! He demands to see you!" Eleanor's blood ran cold. Captain James Burwell. She knew that name. His reputation was one of cruelty and a deep-seated hatred for the tribes. He was a man who looked for reasons to spill blood. "Stay here!" Running Wolf commanded her, his voice a low growl. But Eleanor was already moving toward the flap. "No," she said, her fear of the cavalry momentarily eclipsing her fear of the chief. "Let me come with you. I'm a white woman. He won't shoot if I'm there." Running Wolf stared at her, a strange light in his eyes. Was it surprise or calculation? "You would stand between my people and rifles again?" "I would stand for peace," she said, her voice steadier now. She had a new, desperate thought. If she could de-escalate this, prove her value as a mediator, maybe Running Wolf would reconsider his horrifying plans for her. Her life might depend on what happened in the next 10 minutes. "Then we go together," he said. And for the first time, she felt like they were on the same side. Outside, the tension was a physical thing. Warriors had taken up positions behind lodges, their bows drawn. Women clutched their children, their faces masks of fear. On the edge of the camp, Captain Burwell sat on his horse, flanked by 20 soldiers. He was a stocky man with a brutal face, and his cold eyes swept over the camp with undisguised contempt. "Captain Burwell," Eleanor called out as she and Running Wolf approached. "I am Eleanor Parker, from Finch's trading post. May we ask your business here?" Burwell's eyes widened slightly in surprise at seeing her. He sneered. "Miss Parker, keeping strange company, I see. We're searching for a fugitive." "A fugitive?" Running Wolf asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. "There are no fugitives here." "I'm not looking for one of your braves, Chief," Burwell said, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "I'm looking for a woman, a Blackfeet woman. Goes by the name Singing Bird." Eleanor froze. This wasn't about deserters or stolen cattle. This was about Singing Bird. Why would the U.S. cavalry be hunting for one pregnant native woman? "She is under my protection," Running Wolf stated. "What is your business with her?" Burwell's cruel smile widened. "She's a material witness to a crime, an assault on a U.S. officer. I need to take her back to the fort for questioning." It was a lie. Eleanor knew it in her gut, the way he said it, the hunger in his eyes. He wasn't here to question anyone. She remembered what Finch had told her. Singing Bird was accused of lying with a cavalry officer, an officer who had vanished. And suddenly, looking at Captain Burwell's smug, brutal face, Eleanor understood the terrible truth. He wasn't just an officer. He was the officer. He hadn't vanished. He had come back. He was here to silence the only witness to his crime, to get rid of the evidence she carried in her belly. "Captain," Eleanor said, stepping forward, placing herself directly in his path. "The woman is in the late stages of pregnancy. She is in no condition to travel." "That's not your concern, Miss Parker. Stand aside. This is official military business." "The child she carries," Running Wolf said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It is a cavalryman's child, is it not?" Burwell's face darkened with rage. He had been exposed. "That's a slanderous accusation, Chief. I'm taking the woman. Now." He drew his pistol. In that instant, everything exploded. Running Wolf let out a sharp cry, and from every lodge, warriors rose with their bows aimed directly at Burwell's heart. The soldiers raised their rifles in response. The air crackled, a single gunshot away from a massacre. Eleanor's mind raced. Burwell was a monster, but he commanded the U.S. Army. If he died here, the Army would retaliate with overwhelming force. This entire camp, every man, woman, and child, would be wiped out. But if he took Singing Bird, he would kill her and her unborn child without a second thought. "There is another way," she shouted, her voice ringing out in the terrifying silence. Both Burwell and Running Wolf looked at her. "A trial," she said, the idea forming as she spoke. "Not a military trial. and not a tribal one. A neutral one. Here. Now. Burwell laughed. A trial? With what judge? With me, Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. And with him. She pointed to Burwell's second-in-command, a young lieutenant who looked pale and horrified by the standoff. And with one of the chief's elders. A council of 3. We will hear Singing Bird's testimony and yours. We will decide the truth of it. It was an insane proposal. A desperate, impossible gamble. But it was the only thing she could think of that might prevent the slaughter. Burwell stared at her, his mind clearly working. He was surrounded and outnumbered. A firefight now would mean his death, even if his men won. Her offer was a way out, a way to save face. And he likely believed he could intimidate a schoolteacher and a young lieutenant into siding with him. And if this council finds against me, he sneered, then you and your men will leave this valley in peace and never return, Running Wolf answered for her. And if you are found to be lying, I will send word to your Colonel Whitman myself. I will tell him how one of his captains tried to start a war to cover his own crimes. The threat hung in the air. Colonel Whitman was new to the territory, but he had a reputation for being a man of honor. Burwell's career would be over. After a long, tense moment, Burwell holstered his pistol. Fine, he spat. Have your little trial. Let's see how your frontier justice plays out. He had taken the bait. The immediate danger had passed. But now, Eleanor realized with a sickening lurch, she had to act as judge and jury in a case where the wrong verdict would mean either her own death or the death of the very woman she had sworn to protect. The fate of everyone in the valley now rested on her shoulders. The trial was held in the center of the camp, a circle of armed warriors facing a circle of armed soldiers. The air was thick with hatred and suspicion. Eleanor sat between the nervous young lieutenant and the stone-faced elder, wise owl woman. This was her counsel. A boy who feared his commander, and an old woman who believed Eleanor herself was destined for sacrifice. Singing Bird was brought out, her eyes wide with terror. She recounted her story in a low, trembling voice, telling of the night Captain Burwell had found her alone while she was gathering herbs, how he had forced himself on her, and how he had threatened to burn her village if she ever told anyone. Then it was Burwell's turn. He stood tall, his uniform immaculate, and delivered a confident, booming denial. He claimed the woman was a liar, a harlot who had offered herself to him for money and was now trying to extort him. He painted himself as the victim of a savage's manipulative scheme. He looked directly at the lieutenant as he spoke, a clear and silent threat. The young officer squirmed. When it was his turn to speak, he mumbled that he couldn't be sure who was telling the truth, that it was one person's word against another. It was a coward's verdict. Then Wise Owl Woman spoke in her own tongue. Running Wolf did not translate this time. Her eyes, ancient and sharp, were fixed on Eleanor. She spoke for a long time, her voice rising and falling. Though Eleanor couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear. This was a test, not of Burwell's guilt, but of hers, of where her loyalties truly lay. Finally, it was her turn. The entire camp, the entire cavalry detachment, waited. Her heart pounded. If she sided with Burwell, she would be condemning Singing Bird to death and betraying every moral principle she held. But if she sided with Singing Bird, Burwell would likely explode into violence, and the massacre she had tried to prevent would happen anyway. And what of her own fate? Accusing a U.S. captain would make her an enemy of the army. She would be a traitor, with nowhere to go. She looked at Singing Bird's terrified face. She looked at Burwell's cruel sneer. And she looked at Running Wolf, whose expression was impossible to read, but whose eyes held a challenge. Show me who you are. Taking a deep breath, she stood. I believe Singing Bird, she said, her voice clear and steady. Captain Burwell, you are a liar and a monster. You came here not to see justice done, but to commit murder. Rage contorted Burwell's face. You dare? He roared, his hand flying to his pistol again. But before he could draw it, something happened that no one expected. The young lieutenant, his face pale with sweat but his eyes suddenly clear, stepped forward and drew his own weapon, aiming it squarely at his captain. She's right, sir, the lieutenant said, his voice shaking but firm. I know she's right. 2 weeks ago, you ordered me to falsify a patrol report to cover your absence on the night this happened. I did it because I was scared, but I won't be scared anymore. It was the twist that broke the standoff. Burwell's own man had turned against him. Betrayed and exposed, Burwell stared wildly around at the faces of the warriors, the soldiers, and the woman who had brought him down. With a final curse, he spun around, mounted his horse, and galloped away, his men hesitating for a moment before following their disgraced commander in a full retreat. A collective sigh of relief went through the camp. The soldiers were gone. The threat was over. Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness, the adrenaline leaving her body in a sudden rush. That evening, a celebration was held, not just to mark the avoidance of conflict, but to honor Eleanor. She sat by the council fire next to Running Wolf, the events of the day feeling surreal. Twice now, you have stood between my people and danger, he said, his voice filled with a respect that felt deeper than before. You have the mind of a strategist and the tongue of a diplomat. You see paths where others see only walls. The lieutenant was the real hero, she said. The lieutenant found his courage because you showed him yours, he replied. He then grew serious. Wise Owl Woman spoke to me after the trial. She said she was wrong about you. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Wrong how? She believed your heart was still with the white world, that when tested, you would side with your own kind, no matter the truth. He looked into the flames. Today, you proved your heart belongs to justice, not to one people or another. She waited, her breath held. Did this mean the horrifying talk of sacrifice was over? Was she free? The duty of the queen. It still stands, he said, as if reading her mind. And her hopes plummeted. It is an ancient law. I cannot change it with words alone. Then what was today for? She asked, a new bitterness in her voice. A test to see if I was worthy of being slaughtered for you? No, he said, turning to face her fully. His gaze was intense. It was a test to see if you were strong enough to help me change it. Our ways are old, Eleanor. Some are wise, some are chains. To break a chain, you need a tool of great strength. I believe you are that tool. But you cannot help my people from Finch's trading post. You must be here, among them. They must see you not as an outsider, but as one of us. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The agent from the government wishes to build a school for our children. A school far from here, where they will be taught to forget their language, their gods, their families. They will be turned into white men in red skin. I will not allow it. Here was another twist, another layer to his thinking. I need a teacher, he said, his voice low and urgent. Here, in this camp. Someone who can teach our children the white man's language and numbers, so they cannot be cheated in treaties. Someone who can teach them to read their books, so they can understand their laws. But someone who will also honor our ways and teach them that they can be Blackfeet and educated at the same time. Someone who can build a bridge between our worlds, right here in their hearts. The offer hung in the air, audacious and overwhelming. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a mission, a way to fight back, a way to protect his people. And, she realized, a way to save herself. If she became the teacher woman to the entire nation, if she became indispensable to the future of their children, they could not possibly sacrifice her. It was a political solution to a spiritual problem. He was offering her a way to break the chains. The old ways say the queen must be willing to die for the people, he said, his eyes boring into hers. I say the new queen must be willing to live for them, to fight for them. Will you do this, Eleanor Parker? Will you stay and fight with me? The frontier had taken everything from her, her job, her savings, her sense of safety. Now, it was offering her something far more valuable, a purpose, a chance to stand for something, a chance to live. Yes, she said, I will. Spring melted the snows of the high country, and with it, a new energy flowed through the camp. Eleanor's school, a sturdy cabin built by the warriors, became the heart of the village. 23 children, from the ages of 5 to 12, sat on buffalo robes, their bright, curious eyes fixed on her. At first, they were shy, wary of the white woman and her strange chalk markings. But Eleanor didn't try to erase their world. She blended it with hers. She used the flight of an eagle to teach numbers, the shapes of constellations to teach letters. She taught them English, but she also learned their language, filling notebooks with Blackfeet words and stories. She was not just a teacher, she was a student, and the children, seeing their own culture respected, opened their minds to hers. Running Wolf was a frequent visitor, sometimes sitting in the back and just listening, a quiet approval in his eyes. Other times, he would tell the children stories of their ancestors, his deep voice filling the small cabin, reminding them of the roots that held them firm. A fragile peace had settled over the valley. The disgraced Captain Burwell had been removed from his post, and the new commander, Colonel Whitman, seemed to be a man of his word. But Eleanor knew their peace was a delicate thing, a temporary pause in a long and brutal war for the land itself. One evening, as she was cleaning the slate board, Singing Bird entered the cabin. Her baby, a beautiful, healthy girl, was strapped to her back. Over the past months, a deep bond had formed between the two women. "Teacher woman," Singing Bird said, her gaze serious, "you have done a great thing here. The children are happy. They are learning." "They are wonderful students," Eleanor said with a warm smile. "But there is a shadow growing," Singing Bird continued, her voice dropping. "Not all our people trust this new path. They see the school, they see you, and they see the chief turning away from the old ways." Eleanor's smile faded. "Who?" "Stoneheart," Singing Bird whispered, looking over her shoulder as if the man himself might be listening. "He was a great war chief, like Running Wolf's father. He believes Running Wolf's time in the white man's school made him weak. He says this school will poison the minds of our children. He speaks against you in the council, and more of the elders are listening. Stoneheart." Eleanor had seen him, a tall, grim-faced warrior with eyes that held a permanent storm. He never smiled. He never spoke to her. He only watched, his disapproval a palpable force. "He is clever," Singing Bird warned. "He uses the old laws against the chief. He reminds the people of the prophecy." "The prophecy?" "That when the Blackfeet nation is in its darkest hour, when our lands are stolen and our people are starving, a queen with hair the color of the setting sun will come, and her sacrifice will save us." Singing Bird's eyes were filled with fear. "He tells them you are that queen. He says the chief brought you here to fulfill the prophecy, but that his heart has grown weak, and he now refuses to make the sacrifice that will save us all." A cold dread crept up Eleanor's spine. It was all twisting back, the old fear wearing a new mask. Stoneheart wasn't just disagreeing with school policy. He was painting her as a failed messiah and Running Wolf as a failed leader. He was using their people's deepest beliefs to turn them against their chief. "He is stoking fear," Eleanor said, her voice tight. "He is calling for a vote of challenge at the summer council," Singing Bird said, her words a final terrible blow. "He will challenge Running Wolf for leadership of the nation, and if he wins, he will close the school, and he will see the prophecy fulfilled. He will sacrifice you, Eleanor, to prove his strength and his devotion to the old ways." The summer council was a week away. A week. 7 days until her fate, and the fate of Running Wolf's leadership, would be decided. The school, the children, the bridge she was so carefully building, it could all be burned to the ground by one man's ambition and an ancient, terrifying prophecy. The days leading up to the summer council were thick with a tension that was worse than the standoff with the cavalry. The camp was divided. Whispers followed Eleanor everywhere. Some looked at her with hope, the teacher woman who was leading their children into a new future. Others looked at her with a chilling mixture of awe and resentment, the prophesied queen whose blood might be the price of their survival. Stoneheart moved through the camp like a specter of the old ways, his presence a constant, grim reminder of his challenge. He didn't need to speak to her. His cold, unwavering stare was enough. It said, "Your time is running out." Elelenar continued her classes, her outward calm a fragile shield for the terror within. She looked at the faces of her students. Little Fox, who could now write his name in 2 languages. Bright Willow, who had a gift for numbers, and her heart ached. This wasn't just about her life anymore. It was about theirs. On the eve of the council, Running Wolf came to her cabin. He looked tired, the weight of his nation heavy on his shoulders. "They are afraid," he said, his voice low. "Stoneheart offers them a simple answer to a complicated world. He offers them the comfort of the old ways, the power of sacrifice." "And you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you offer them?" He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "A harder path. A path of change, of learning, of walking in 2 worlds. It is not an easy thing to sell to a people who have lost so much." He stepped closer. "Elelenar, if Stoneheart wins the challenge tomorrow, you must flee. Take a horse and ride east. Do not stop until you reach the fort." "Flee?" The word felt like a betrayal. "And leave you? Leave the children?" "My fate is to lead my people or die trying," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Your fate is not to be a pawn in his game of power. I brought you here to help me save my people, not to be their sacrifice. I will not have your death on my hands." His words, meant to protect her, felt like a defeat. She had come to think of this valley as her home, these people as her own. To run would be to abandon everything she had fought for. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I will not run. I stood before Burwell's guns. I will stand before Stoneheart's words. I am the teacher woman of this tribe, and I am your queen. My place is here, with you." A flicker of something, admiration, pain, something deeper, crossed his face. He reached out and took her hand, his grip strong and warm. "The heart of a Blackfeet woman," he said softly. "I knew it from the first moment I saw you." The council gathered at dawn. 7 bands, hundreds of people, formed a great circle around the central fire. The chiefs and elders sat in the inner ring. Stoneheart stood, tall and imposing, and began to speak. His voice was a thunderous boom, rolling across the silent crowd. He spoke of broken treaties, of the disappearing buffalo, of the sickness that the white man brought. He painted a picture of a dying nation, a people on the brink of extinction. Then, he turned and pointed a finger directly at Elelenar. "And what is our chief's answer?" he roared. "A white woman. He brings our enemy into our camp and calls her queen. He builds a school to teach our children to forget who they are. He ignores the sacred prophecy that was given to us by the spirits. The prophecy that tells of a queen with fire in her hair, whose sacrifice will restore our strength." He paused, letting his words sink in. Running Wolf is a great warrior, but his heart has been softened by the white man's world. He no longer has the strength to do what must be done. I say he is no longer fit to lead. He issued the formal challenge. A murmur went through the crowd. This was it. The moment of decision. According to their law, Running Wolf could meet the challenge in one of 2 ways: through a vote of the elders, or through single combat to the death. Running Wolf rose, his face calm, his presence radiating a quiet power that was the complete opposite of Stoneheart's blustering rage. He looked not at Stoneheart, but at his people. "Stoneheart speaks of fear," he said, his voice clear and carrying to every person in the circle. "I speak of hope. He speaks of endings. I speak of beginnings. He looks to the past and sees only what we have lost. I look to the future and see what our children can become." He turned his gaze to Elelenar. "He calls this woman our enemy. I call her our greatest weapon. She teaches our children to read the treaties that are used to trick us. She teaches them the numbers that are used to cheat us. She is not weakening us. She is making us stronger. Stoneheart says we must sacrifice her to save our people. I say, To sacrifice her would be to sacrifice our future. Then he did something that stunned the entire council into silence. He walked over to where Elelenar was sitting and knelt before her, taking her hand. "He calls her queen as an accusation," Running Wolf said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I call her queen as a promise. Among my people, a chief stands with his queen, his partner, his equal. I have asked this woman to teach our children. I have asked her to advise our council. Now, I ask her to stand beside me as my wife." He was proposing, here, now, in front of everyone, at the moment of his greatest political crisis. It wasn't a declaration of love, it was a political masterstroke. By asking her to marry him, he was binding her to him, to the tribe, in the most permanent way possible. He was making her family. You don't sacrifice family. He was choosing the path of life, of unity, of the future, in direct opposition to Stoneheart's path of death and the past. "Elelenar Parker," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity, "will you join your life with mine? Will you join your world with ours, and help me lead our people into a new dawn?" Tears welled in her eyes. It was more than a proposal. It was a culmination of everything that had happened since she first stepped out of that trading post. It was a choice between fear and hope, between an old prophecy and a new future. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I will be your partner in all things." A great cheer erupted from a large part of the crowd. Running Wolf stood and raised their joined hands high. But Stoneheart was not defeated. "A trick!" he bellowed. "A desperate move to save his power. It changes nothing. The law is the law. A challenge has been made." He pointed at Running Wolf. "I demand combat." The camp fell silent once more. It was the final, brutal move. A fight to the death. Running Wolf's face hardened. He released Elelenar's hand and turned to face his challenger. "I accept," he said. The world seemed to shrink to the space between the two men. They were given knives, their only weapons. They circled each other, the tension a living thing. Stoneheart was bigger, a mountain of muscle and rage. But Running Wolf was faster, smarter. He moved with a dancer's grace, his eyes calculating, watching. The fight was brutal and quick. Stoneheart lunged, a wild, powerful strike. Running Wolf dodged, using his opponent's momentum against him. There was a blur of motion, a flash of steel. Stoneheart staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief, a dark red stain spreading across his chest. He fell to his knees and then collapsed into the dust. It was over. Running Wolf stood over his opponent, his chest heaving. He had not just won a fight, he had won the future of his people. He turned to the silent, stunned crowd. "The path of fear is over," he declared, his voice booming with a new authority. "Today, we choose the path of hope." 1 month later, beneath the vast Montana sky, Elelenar and Running Wolf were married. The ceremony blended the traditions of two worlds. Mr. Finch even came, looking uncomfortable but bearing a gift, and grumbled that he'd been wrong about her. Colonel Whitman attended as a witness, a symbol of the new peace. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the valley, Running Wolf led her to the rocky outcropping that overlooked the camp, their favorite spot. "My grandmother told me that a true leader seeks not power, but responsibility," he said, taking her hands. "Together, we carry the responsibility for our people's future." Elelenar looked down at the camp, at the lights beginning to glow in the lodges, at the cabin that housed her school. She had come west looking for a purpose, and had found it in the most unexpected way imaginable. She had found a home. She had found a family. And she had found a love that was strong enough to build a bridge between two worlds. As Running Wolf's queen, his partner, his wife, she would help him lead their people, not through sacrifice, but through strength, knowledge, and courage. "Look," Running Wolf said, pointing to the first star appearing over the mountains. "A new light for a new beginning." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder, her heart full. "A light to guide us home." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Elelenar's journey and where in the world you're watching from. Thanks for being here.